You've probably heard the saying, fighting fire with fire. But did you know that this is actually a pretty good solution to the wildfire crisis going on in California? Alright, so how we're going to talk about this is we're going to draw in 2 trees here, and then we're going to simulate wildfire within this ecosystem, and just kind of go through the different stages that we could see when it comes to our fuels, and how that's going to change how the wildfire behaves. So the first thing we're going to do is just look at our 2 trees, and then we're going to see what happens if a fire starts to move through here. And given the fact that we don't put the fire out, it's going to continue to move along the ground. And what it's going to do as it moves along the ground is actually clean up the ecosystem. It's going to clear out any of the grass that was growing. Maybe there was some brush starting to grow, and that fire is just going to basically give the landscape a haircut. And what's going to happen to the trees is they're basically going to be fine, especially if they're something like a redwood tree or a giant sequoia, which actually have fire-resistant bark. They're going to be completely fine, and they actually might even be better off because now there's less plants competing for the limited water resources. All right, so let's take stage 2. Let's say that fire starts, and instead of letting it burn through the landscape, clear out some of the grasses, clear out some of the brush, we just put out that fire instantly. So what's going to happen in this situation is we're going to start to see some of those fuels that should have burnt out start to build up. So we get some brush right there, some brush right here, some brush right here, and you might even get some little trees growing in this landscape as well. We could maybe draw one of those in. We'll just draw some trees like this. Not the best, but you get the picture. So we basically have fuels building up closer towards the canopy of those trees. So what's going to happen in this situation now if a fire comes through? So let's take our little flame here again, and now let's see what happens. Flame hits that brush, and your flame's going to be a lot bigger than it was the last time. Maybe it doesn't reach into the canopy at that point, but then as it continues to move along, now when it reaches that lower grasses, it moves into the brush, and then that brush is able to burn into some of those trees, and then the trees act as what you would call ladder fuels, and that basically clears out the canopy like that, and everything basically burns. So that's not what you want in a natural ecosystem. What you want in your natural ecosystem is before what you would call those ladder fuels, those fuels connecting the brush to the trees, before those grow in and develop, what you're going to want to do is what's called a prescribed burn. So you are going to purposely put some fire on the ground, or it actually doesn't have to be a prescribed burn. This could also be the case where a fire starts and then we actually just choose not to put it out. So we just allow the fire to burn. Now, obviously there are some caveats to this. As more houses are built in the wildland-urban interface, we can't exactly just allow a fire to burn through. But we can allow a fire to burn in an ecosystem that isn't fully developed, and we can actually let it burn kind of around settlements and clear out some of the fuels, which can actually later turn into a protective barrier for that community. So whether we want to call this just a natural fire that we're allowing to burn or a prescribed fire, the idea here is that before these brush or these trees grow tall enough to let a fire burn into the canopy, we are actually going to purposely burn out the brush down here. So those brush burn out, that's almost a little tongue twister right there, and we're left with that original ecosystem with just those 2 trees. So then when the next fire comes through, we are basically fine. So what does this landscape look like right here? Well, this landscape is actually a lot healthier for a couple of reasons. One is the obvious reason that we've been talking about through the course of this video, that if a fire comes through, it's not going to be able to jump all the way in the canopy. That's just not going to happen. The other reason that this landscape is actually healthier though is if you think about this plot of land right here, and you think about all the rain that comes down on this plot of land. We're calling that 8 drops, whether that's 8 tons or whatever kind of system of measurement for seasonal rainfall you want to call it. There's a certain amount of water that's going to fall on this land. So what happens in that situation where we allowed all of those fuels to build up? You're splitting the exact same amount of water among a much larger amount of plants. So instead of all that water being split between 2 trees, now you're splitting it between all this brush down here, all this brush down here, and each one of these plants is soaking up a bit more of the water, so that means each plant individually gets less and they dry out. On the flip side, if that fire is allowed to burn through the landscape and you have 2 trees instead of 60, those trees are going to get all the water they need and they're going to be a lot healthier. So this is basically a long-winded way of saying that when you allow fire to burn or you purposely put the fire on the ground in the form of prescribed burns, it's able to clear out some of the fuels, and then that actually leads to a healthier landscape, and it also leads to less extreme wildfires in the future, which is good for humans and the environment. So I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.